Hello, everyone, and welcome to High-Dosage Tutoring and Other Academic Strategies. I am Courtney Miller, and I'll be with you for the next 30 minutes or so. I'm actually located in the DMV, and no, that is not the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's actually Washington, D.C., Maryland, and the Virginia area, where I've been for the last 19 years. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout our session today, so feel free to engage in the chat, and I'll be expecting you to do so during our time today. We'll begin by framing our time. I'll ask for you to drop in the chat where you're located. You've heard a little bit about me, so go ahead and drop in the chat where you're located, and that'll serve as our virtual introductions for today. We'll go over this quick overview, our objective for our purpose to frame our time today. The meat of our time will be spent on high dosage tutoring, and then we'll transition to other recovery strategies, followed by a Q&A and a discussion time. So why are we here? Take a moment and go ahead and read our objective, and then I'll jump back in to summarize. So our goal, target objective, is to examine the structure and challenges associated with academic recovery strategies with a focus on high dosage tutoring in order to improve student outcomes. With our younger scholars, we use a more simplified I can version. So you see that at the bottom. I can describe and plan or implement recovery strategies to improve outcomes. So high dosage tutoring. How many of you have heard of this term before? If you're in education, it seems like a pretty new thing, but how new is it? So in the chat, again, drop a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 that shows and reflects your familiarity with high dosage tutoring. Enter 1 if you've never heard of it. Enter 2 if you've heard of it, but you don't really know what it is. A 3 if you know what it is, but you haven't put it into practice at your school or district. 4, your school or district has attempted high dose tutoring with limited success. And 5, if you have successfully implemented high dosage tutoring in your school or district. So take a moment and drop a number 1 through 5 in the chat. Looks like we have a mixture of folks with varying experiences, so we'll jump right in. So how is high dosage tutoring defined, and what qualifies as high dosage tutoring? In a 2020 Ed Week article, Stephen Sawchuk defined it as one-on-one tutoring or tutoring in very small groups at least 3 times a week for about 50 hours over a semester. Notice the emphasis on the ratio, the 1-to-1, also on the frequency, 3 times a week, and the period of time. In DC, is defined by no more than 3 students 3 times a week, ideally daily for 30 or 60 minutes, but during the school day. According to the Tennessee Department of Education, they describe high dosage or low ratio tutoring as no more than 3 students per tutor daily for about 40 to 60 minutes. And the Colorado Department of Education caps their groups at 6, meeting at least 4 days per week. But what is common that it involves very small groupings happening frequently or daily over the course of extended periods of time with a consistent tutor. So let's look at one structure and design model that was used at my previous school and my previous district. At my previous school, we employed a team of tutors from an agency. We didn't have the time that it would take to advertise, interview, or hire while still trying to staff our full-time teaching positions. So the company that we partnered with provided 7 tutors who reported to our middle school 4 days a week. Every Wednesday in our district is a half day where teachers have professional development. So in order to maximize our time with tutors, we agreed on Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. The tutors weren't cheap, so we had to consider who would receive tutoring and who would not. Rather than pick from each grade and have parents wonder why my scholar was not receiving tutoring and why other scholars were selected, we settled on grade levels. So all of our 6th and 7th graders were pulled out from their intervention courses for tutoring 4 days a week for about 40 minutes. The way our schedule was set up was that each scholar was enrolled in a full-time math class, ELA class that happened every day, as well as a math intervention course and a reading intervention course that happened more on an 8A B-day schedule where they alternated. Scholars were pulled out from those intervention courses 3 times a week into smaller locations or separate locations where they could really engage with their tutors, and they focused on the core classroom content up until about March. So in March, there was a shift from the classroom curriculum and classroom content to our test prep as we prepare for the state assessment. So I would say it was about 6 months if you remove the holidays and the winter breaks and things like that. But we needed to capture all this information somewhere so that everyone was aware of the who, what, the when, and where. So we used a tracking and monitoring tool to help identify and group scholars and provide an organized hub for transparency and accountability. I love a good spreadsheet, so I'm actually going to click into this tool so that way we can take a deeper dive into how we use the tool at our school. All right, so one note, when building spreadsheets, always use your unique identification labels. We call them USIs here in the district, but this allows you to pull data from other sources, such as attendance or other databases, to either triangulate data or display the information on your screen. So here we have, and this is all made up information. So there are no privacy standards are laws being broken here, and made up names as well. You'll notice our tutors are actually mathematicians that's listed here in column M. But here we use this information to capture basic information from scholars, their names, their grade levels, special populations, and also we organize scholars by their cohorts where they're named after different colleges and universities. So you see the beginning of the year map data, their 21-22 park data, their Unit 1 assessment data, and then their attendance data. So this enabled us to look across different data points to group scholars in different groups at different times with various tutors. So it indicates who their tutors were. And remember, these tutors are to remain constant and consistent over this period of time. It shows what days they'll be tutored, the location where they'll be tutored, and the time where they'll be tutored. Now, there's some other options that are not quite necessary, but you can include them here. You may notice that on this screen, there's also the ability to capture their attendance, whether or not they're present, absent, or tardy from the tutoring sessions, because that gives you insight on how much they should be progressing and how much of the tutoring and high dosage tutoring they actually receive. So as I mentioned, this enabled us to triangulate data using multiple data points. It made it visible and transparent for accountability with all teachers. So teachers were clear on who should be pulled from their classrooms and when and during what periods. Some trackers may not use times, they may use class periods. They also could include what classes scholars are being pulled from. So that way, if you have younger kids, the tutors know where to go to pick them up. Older kids, for our scholars, they came to the location if they're responsible enough to transition on their own. Using these spreadsheets allowed the possibility for filtering. So tutors were able to go in and filter and see their own caseload. If they wanted to print that, teachers were able to filter by cohort, et cetera, et cetera. And lastly, I'll just mention again that you're able to expand it for attendance. You can do mastery tracking and include tabs that also track what they're working on and how well they're progressing throughout that content. So we've been discussing a number of different features, and by features, I mean the tutors, the ratios, the curriculum, etc. EdTrust published this table that provides somewhat of a continuum that outlines the more effective features and conditions to the less effective features and conditions. Depending on certain constraints, such as budgetary and human resources, you may move further down the continuum or further up the continuum. You may not have enough tutors to support your entire 9th grade or your entire school, so you may use teachers, coupled with paraprofessionals, or maybe even seniors to provide tutoring to younger scholars for community service hours or to offset and increase the number of kids that can be serviced. So there are likely certain constraints that will impact your results. So let's look at a couple of those constraints. First thing that we think about, money. Providing tutoring to your entire school may be unlikely, especially in the 1-to-2, 1-to-3, or even 1-to-4 ratios. So you may decide to choose a certain grade level, so that way everyone in a grade level has access to high dosage tutoring. There are other decisions that can be made to shift to after school, but after school we know could limit participation engagement. Know that there are competing priorities as scholars have sports, they have to pick up siblings, or other things that they're committed to that will prevent them from staying after school or coming before school. Staffing constraints. With a ratio of 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 or even 1-to-4, there are a lot of different individuals. As I mentioned, we had 7 tutors that we contracted to come to provide tutoring for about 120 scholars. So depending on how many students you're trying to serve, this could mean that there are a lot of different staff that you have to employ or contract with. Now, here in Washington, D.C., my previous school was located within a mile of about 7 or 8 other schools in the district. It's like a school in every corner. So there is an opportunity to split the cost with a neighboring school where they may come to your school in the morning and come to another school in the afternoon and help bear that burden. You can secure grants, solicit volunteers. There may be a lot of different colleges in your area, or you may be in a school district where you have older scholars or peers that could support some of the younger students. Space, physical constraints. So we use classroom spaces during planning periods. We also use the library, the cafeteria, conference rooms. But one of the most popular go-tos were admin offices, your principals, your deans, your instructional coaches, your guidance counselors, anyone who has space. We would use that space for different pullouts. But the key was to identify that space in advance and communicate with those counselors and admin, so that way you weren't intruding on their space, but it was clear that there was an expectation that tutors would be in that space with scholars at those given periods. And the last thing are the time constraints. So high dosage tutoring is set up so that it happens during the day. That's your maximum audience. That's when you have the availability to the majority of your scholars. So during the day is key, but there's always a give and take in adding additional minutes to the day. So you have to determine which classes or which blocks of time kids will be pulled for high dosage tutoring. If you have a dedicated block for intervention or tutoring, that's outstanding, because there's the expectation of that's when intervention happens. When you don't have that dedicated block, you have to determine which class you'll pull scholars from. And I know in our school and in our district, ELA and math usually take the priority. And I know that our social studies, science, and elective teachers don't like when we say that. But what is true is that we treasure what is measured. And ELA and math are measured on just about every state assessment, every SAT that I know. So a lot of times scholars are pulled from their specials, or they may be pulled from their science or social studies courses when they have to be pulled from given class periods. But I suggest that you speak with those teachers in advance of implementing that time schedule, so that way they aren't surprised, offended, and you can kind of mitigate any type of feelings that they may have about pulling kids from their class. So we've talked a lot about high dosage tutoring, but that is only one academic recovery strategy. There are many other great things happening to address learning loss and learning gaps, so we'll jump into other academic recovery strategies. I was unable to find a definition for an academic recovery strategy, so I followed the old saying, where there is no path, create one. So in 2023, Courtney Miller defined an academic recovery strategy as a program or initiative designed to address the deficits or decline in skills, concepts, and standards that may include combinations of remediation, acceleration, and prioritization. So given this definition of an academic recovery, take a moment in the chat to list any programs or initiatives in your school or district that may qualify as an academic recovery strategy. So I've captured a few here. Now, these may look different from school to school and from even grade to grade. So as I mentioned, for our high dosage tutoring, we had individualized intervention courses during the school day. Now, scholars can be pulled from those. People may push in, they may provide small groups. Our scholars practice on skills using IXL and other software where they were able to be pulled into different groups and focus on different skills and concepts based on data and the teacher's response to their exit ticket data and other data. After school programming. So some people may have Saturday school, you may have tutoring after school, there may be recovery that happens before or after school, I should mention. We have summer programming, which is recovery or remediation, enrichment, and it also can be acceleration for different scholars based on their need. One thing that we do, or that we did for grades 6 through 11, every scholar who was in a tested grade had a double blocked ELA and a double block math. So they took ELA and math twice as much as they would any subject, course, etc. So for our A-Day, B-Day schedule, for our high school scholars, which was a 4x4, scholars had and B-Day. The other thing I'll mention is we transitioned from a 6-period day to a 4x4 schedule, basically like an 8A, B-Day, where scholars were able to take 8 classes per semester as opposed to 6 classes per semester. So this also allowed for the double blocking and opportunities for scholars to take support classes, enrichment classes, or courses that can accelerate them in their high school career. You can also extend the current blocks. I don't know how people feel about that right now, but that may require an extending the school day. So if you have that flexibility, you may say, hey, let's add a block. We want to add an intervention block that's 40 minutes per day for every scholar so we can make sure that they're practicing and they're getting the individualized attention that they need. Implementing a period 0, depending on your school culture, scholars may come early before school and be able to have access to support. We're always trying to get kids to come on time, so period 0 wasn't really a great option for us, but there may be scholars that you can target who can come to school early to get individualized support or targeted support and intervention. And then the last one I have here is a reprioritization of content. So this could include collapsing content or collapsing courses to include the most essential standards, concepts, and skills. So for example, there may be a math 7.5 that integrates 7th grade math standards with high priority 8th grade math standards. Or there may be an Algebra 2 trigonometry class that is condensed as opposed to scholars having to take both Algebra 2 and trigonometry as separate courses. So there are a lot of different recovery strategies. These are just a couple that I jotted down. Take a moment to review the ones that your colleagues have put in the chat that hopefully serve as ideas or initiatives to help either the learning gaps or the learning loss that we've experienced during COVID and even prior to COVID. So as we close and prepare to shift to our questions and discussion, I just want to review 4 main takeaways. High dosage tutoring refers to an intensive and frequent tutoring approach, typically in very, very small groups or pairs with fewer than 4 students, aimed at academic recovery. It emphasizes the duration and the frequency of tutoring sessions over a specific period of time. Implementing high dosage tutoring requires careful consideration of various factors, including the selection of tutors, target recipients, time and locations, and other resources. When implementing academic recoveries, trade-offs may be necessary to address different constraints such as financial, personnel, physical, and time constraints that require decision-making when implementing academic recovery strategies. In addition to high-dosage tutoring, various other academic recovery strategies can be utilized to tackle deficits or declines in skills, concepts, through remediation, prioritization, and acceleration. So at this time, we want to pause for questions and have some discussion about high-dosage tutoring and other academic strategies in order to improve student outcomes. I'm looking at the chat to see if there are any questions. So feel free to drop those in. Well, if not, thank you so much for your time today and your engagement in the chat and your patience as we worked out the technical issues. My information should be either in the bio. I know it was at the end of the slides if that didn't come up, but it's Courtney Miller email at gmail.com. Again, Courtney Miller email at gmail.com. If you need to get access to any trackers or tools, please feel free to reach out. Or if you're interested in any other aspects of high dosage tutoring at your school or in your district or with your program, please feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to share my experiences with you. Thank you so much and have a great remainder of your afternoon.